Hello and welcome. This is Apex Phantom of the 7th Foos Battalion. I'm here today to present to you a video showing a top-to-bottom approach on how to create a custom uniform in the game Holdfast. I've gotten a lot of requests to help out people to create their own mods ever since I released this one here. This is our 7 Foos line infantry. I'm quite proud of it. People seem to like it. I know I certainly do. But lots of people want to make similar uniforms, and I'm certainly happy to help people out. However, it is a quite lengthy and complicated process, so oftentimes explaining this verbally is a bit of a pain and often leaves people with way more questions than there were answers, because each little bit of the process can be quite troublesome. So I figured rather than just sitting in a call with like 10 different people and spending a lot of their time and mine, I would create this video showing start to finish how to create models like this. Now, this is intended to be like a compendium of knowledge that both I have discovered and has been taught to me from others. I've certainly received a lot of help from countless other people in the modding community, people much better at I than all these things. However, they're all busy people, and I figured I'd be the one to create a video since there isn't really a top-down approach like that out there right now. This is likely going to be a very long video. As I've said, it is a quite involved process, especially if you have no idea what you're doing like me. So I'm going to be breaking it into subparts all within the video and like timestamp each one, so that way you can jump around to the parts you need, slow down, rewatch bits, all that. We'll cover extracting the models from the game. We'll cover editing the uniform and prepping it as you want. We'll cover model editing and prepping the models themselves, and how to finish the model, and how to compile it, and then finally compiling it in Unity and uploading to the game. To follow along with this tutorial, you will need the following software. You'll need Asset Studio or another asset extractor. You will need GIMP or another photo editor like Photoshop or Paint 3D. GIMP is free, you can get it online, as is Paint.net. However, while GIMP is not quite as good as Photoshop, I think it is good enough, and it's better than like Microsoft Paint or whatever. So I recommend GIMP. You'll also need 3ds Max or Cinema 4D. I use 3ds Max because that was what was taught to me. However, other people use Cinema 4D, like Flopper, another fantastic modder. So that one will also work, but I will not be covering it here because I don't know how to use it. So just if you want to follow along with this, you'll need you'll need a 3ds Max. Only 3ds Max and Cinema 4D are supported by AGS, by the way. So I recommend using one of those two. You'll also need Unity, specifically this version of Unity. In the SDK guide that AGS did provide, they tell you how to get Unity and provide a link to this. I will not be covering how to do that because they already did. You will also need some files. You'll need the character atlases, the diffuse atlas, the normal map, the specular map, and the occlusion map. So 4 files there. I am not going to cover how to get those because the ones that I use were sent to me privately. And if you would like them, just ask the modding community. Someone will provide you what you need. We also won't be going over how to create custom models like in 3ds Max or whatever, because there are plenty of other good tutorials on YouTube for that, and I know very little about it. Same thing for how to do GIMP and editing the uniforms. If people want to, I can show some basics in a separate video, but that's outside the scope of this one. I also won't be going over how to create sprites, but we'll get into that later. That pretty much covers it. As I said, this will be a comprehensive tutorial on all of my knowledge, as limited as it might be. If you want to create things like me, then just watch the video. Without further ado, we will get started with part 1, which will be model extraction. Alright, the first step in creating your new model, if you would like to use any model other than the base British line infantry, you need to extract the file from the game. You need to extract the models. To do that, you're going to need to open up Asset Studio, and then you are going to go into File and Load File. You'll then have to navigate into your Steam Apps folder. You can find it in your library. Go to Common, Holdfast Nations at War, Holdfast NAW_data, and then you're going to want to scroll down until you find the file called resources.assets. Double click on that, and it will load up. It might take a few moments, but I've already loaded it here. Once you've done so, you'll see that this green bar at the bottom is full. It's loaded all the way. Finished loading 5 files, yada yada yada. And there's this little drop down with resource assets. You want to click on the tab that says Asset List, and these are all the assets you can see in game. You can click through them. Wow, look at all the neat stuff. These are all the files that Holdfast uses in game. What we want are the uniforms. So to start with, we're going to type in uniform in the search bar here, hit enter, and look at this. All the different uniforms. I'm going to search by name and then scroll down a bit. Now, the way that these are labeled is they're not really, which is kind of annoying. So what you have to do is tab through each of these, click through them, and you can take a look at the models here. As you can see, this is probably our British Line Infantry. You can go down. The only labeling system they have here is that they are marked with their LOD. If you don't know what an LOD is, they're like the levels of detail. There's 0 through 5 actually, 0 through 5. We just want the LOD zeros. Each model has its own unique identifier number. They don't correspond with anything as far as I'm aware of, they're just unique identifiers. So let's say, for example, we want to create our own custom Prussian line infantry. That's fitting. I'm from a Prussian regiment. Why not? We're just going to have to search through these and try to find the one that we want. I've already extracted these, so I'll leave it up to you to go through until you find them. I recommend going on the Holdfast wiki. You can take a look at all the different characters that they have in game until you find the one that it looks like. Once we have found the model we want, say it's this one, we're going to right click on the name of the file. We're going to hit Export Selected Assets, and you're going to navigate to a folder where you want to store them. I just put them on my D drive. I recommend putting them into a labeled folder because you can't actually tell apart the names. You can rename them later, or like I said, you can just put a labeled folder, say Prussians _ line infantry or whatever, and drop them in there. And then you'll have the body. Now we need to find the head. So we'll type in RAS, hit search. Might just take a moment to load. There we go. And we're going to do the same thing. The heads have another layer of labeling, which is useful. They have numbers after RAS _. So 1 is head 1. Because there's different heads in the game, if you go to RAS _2, that's the next head. The way I'm going to show you, you only need to find one of them. So let's say we wanted our Prussian guy. We would go through. This guy might be the one we're looking for. Actually, it's not. But if it was, we would right-click and export that one as well to the same folder. That's it. That's extracting the models. It gets complicated from here on out. On to part 2. Alright, the next step is to crop out the texture that we want. AGS has their textures arranged in atlases like this. This is the Prussian atlas. You can see that there are a lot of different units, all of their textures on the same image. This helps them save memory, but we just want the one unit here. We just want our Prussian line infantry. So I'm going to open this with a GIMP, and then we need to crop out the specific unit. Fortunately, they have already a little bit of some guidelines as to where each one starts and the next one stops. However, with the Prussians, it can be a little tricky to determine which one's which because they all have very similar uniform. But I know that this one is the Prussian line infantry because I've grabbed it before. This is the white bandolier they have. It's got the little Shako plate there. And we're just going to pull these across and try to get every pixel that we can. Not get too many extras, so that way it lines up properly. Once I've dragged the guide wires on there, I'm going to crop out the actual texture. Pull this down. Double check my corners. Hit enter, and there we go. That's what I want. I'm going to save that. I'm going to export it as a PNG, so it saves the alpha layers in the background, useful for our textures that want to crop out bits. And I'm also going to do the same thing for the normal map, the occlusion map, and the specular map. As you can see, I've already done that. So we will move on to the next step, which is actually working with the models that we extracted previously. Alrighty, on to the next step, part 3, editing the models. Now this is by far the lengthiest and most complicated step, so bear with me. First, we're going to need to open up 3ds Max and create a new scene. You can save this however you want, but we'll worry about that later. Next, we're going to need to open up the folder that contains the SDK editor. You should have grabbed it before. It was mentioned in the SDK guide. But once you do that, it contains some examples. So you'll navigate into the Holdfast NAW project SDK, go to Assets, Holdfast Common, Model Examples, and then we're going to go into Character Model Reference Example. As you can see, I've created some subfolders here for the projects I've been working on. I recommend you do the same, but you don't need to do that right now. Then we're going to scroll down until we find the character example. They've provided us with the basic British line infantry, and they've labeled it here as the example character. What we're going to do is we're going to take that, and I'm just going to drag it right under the scene, hit import file. It's going to freak out for just a moment, and we're going to wait for it to settle. Alright, if you just see the head like this, don't freak out. I'm just going to click close to the origin, and look at that, there we go. Next, I'm going to open up my Scene Explorer so I can take a look at all of the things contained, collapse this. As you can see, there's a lot. Contained in this model is not only the uniform itself, but also all of the heads and all of the LODs for all the heads. We don't need the other LODs. So, what you should do is go through and delete all of the extra LODs. To do that, first I'm going to make sure everything here is visible. Then I'm going to go through, wait for it to load again, because, you know, it's big, it's a lot going on here. There we go. I'm going to go through and delete all of the extra LODs. There's one, there's the next one, and so on. What you can also do is you'll see you do have the different heads here. So you have head 1, we have head 2, all the way down to head 7. You can keep all of them, you can keep just one, it is up to you. I'm just going to do 2. I normally just keep like 2 or 3 of them lately because, you know, 2 heads are better than 1, but also not as annoying to deal with as all 7 of them. So I'm just going to delete everything else, and we're going to keep just the first 2 heads, LOD 0. I'm going to delete the extra uniforms as well. And there we go. That's our uniform. Next, we're going to pull in the files that we need for our new uniform. So now we can insert our new model that we want to mess with. We've deleted the extra LODs, the extra heads, and we want to get started with what we actually want to make, because if you're like me, you probably have use for other models than just the British Line Infantry, as far as you can get with just him. So I'm going to navigate to where I saved the other uniform that I pulled in. I had already extracted all of these, other LODs. I learned later I didn't actually need them, but I still have them. We're just going to grab LOD 0, and I'm going to drag that into the scene. Don't be alarmed. As you can see, when you pull them in, he's quite small. He's very small. He's also laying flat on his face. So our next step is going to be to rectify that. We're going to hold right click. That will bring you the little menu there so I can rotate this. Also, to pan around, you're going to hold Alt and your middle mouse button, and that's going to let you look around like this. To just move around, just hold your middle mouse button and you can do that. Yes, hold right click, go to rotate, And then I can adjust it this way. And in the bottom here, if we want to be precise, I'll just put it at -90. That's going to stand him straight on his feet. I'm then going to move him back into position. I'm just going to put his origins at 0, because that's approximately where I put this guy. I can tweak it later. I'll slide him around using the little arrows there. And then I'm going to scale him up. I'll switch to scale, and I'll pull from the middle. And I'll just keep going until he looks like he's about the same size. And then what I like to do to make sure that they're the same size is zoom in on the hands, because those, regardless of the unit, should always be in the same spot. So if I've aligned him like centered properly, which it doesn't look like I have, but if I've aligned him centered properly, then the hands should be the same size. So first I'm going to make sure that he's about as centered as I can make him. And then I'm going to look back at the hands and mess with the scale. I think I got it pretty close, but I'm going to mess with it all the same. And I can adjust the slider down here too. He was a little too big, so I'm going to scale him down. Best I can, close as I can. The closer you can do, the better. And then I'm going to move him to overlay over the base unit here as close as I possibly can again. So that's going to be very important that you get it as close as you can. If you're off by a little bit, that's fine, but your goal should be to match it up just about perfectly, which you can kind of do if you scale it right. It just takes some playing with and some practice. Gonna view it from different angles, make sure the height is right and the distance back and forth. I'm gonna say that's pretty close. It'll certainly do for now. Okay, we have done that. Next, I'm going to hide the original LOD, and we're gonna mess with the body here, our new model. So the first thing we're going to do to our new model is we're going to delete the hands. What I like to do is I like to keep the hands from the example character. I don't know why, it just helps better. I've had issues when I don't and I try to replace the other model entirely. So I like to just keep the base model hands. It makes the process a little simpler, a little easier. So to delete the hands from our new model, I'm going to select our new model, and on the right side here, I'm going to go down to Editable Mesh, choose this drop down, click Element, and if I'm selecting by element, then I can just drag over the hands and it'll be fine. I'm going to hold Control, do the same to the other hand, and then I can actually just hit delete here, and they're gone. This skeleton you hear or see here is the bones that is like the rigging for the model. Those should be there, don't worry about it. But now we have adjusted we've deleted the hands, and we can get on to the next step, which is to edit any other parts of the model. Now, if you are like me and you want to add different parts, maybe you don't like this scabbard, you want to delete it. Maybe you don't like the bandolier, you want to delete it, or you want to add something else to it. This is when you should do that. Anything that you want to model onto the guy is when you should do that now. For example, if you wanted to add a different bandolier from a different model entirely, I could drag that other model in, I could pull off parts of that, delete the rest of it, put the parts onto here, and then I could attach it to the new model. And how you do that is you would just hit this attach button and click on any other objects you want to attach to your new model. Next, we are going to edit the normal maps. So to edit the normals, so not the normal maps, the normals, we're going to click on the drop down here with our new uniform still selected, and we're going to look for edit normals. Those are our normals, they're a mess. Hit Control A, select all of them. Rex Seal recommended I reset them, so I do that. I select all of them again, and then I hit Unify. And if I click away, they're this bright blue. This will fix how light reflects off of your character in-game. A lot of times the models that you pull in will have issues with their light reflection. They'll appear very dark, or it'll just be really weird. This will fix that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to right-click on Edit Normals. I'll hit Collapse To. That's going to bake it into the model itself. and then we're all set with that. The next step is to adjust the UVW mapping. The UVW mapping is what tells the program to lay the texture onto the model. It's what tells essentially the model how to pull from your texture file and where to put the various parts. It tells where the bandolier goes, the arms where the arms goes, the scabbard, and so on. How these are defaulted is to draw from that atlas we had. So if you don't want to edit this at all, then just use the atlas, don't crop it out, but it's annoying because it's a very big file and it takes forever and wastes memory. Using this method, you'll be able to crop out your atlas to just the texture you want, as I showed you previously, and it will also pull from the right areas. So to do that, we're going to select our model again. We're going to go back to the modifier list, and we're going to scroll down until we see Unwrap UVW. As you can see, this is the edges of our mapping. The next step is to actually go back to the thing that we just cropped out, our texture file. I'm going to drag that onto the model. As you can see, it fills it out, but it's not doing it right because we've cropped it. It's just pulling from the wrong areas. It's the wrong scale. To fix that, we're going to click Open UV Editor. It's going to pop up here. As you can see, it's very small. We're going to go in the top right where it says checker pattern. Click down. Sometimes it'll pop up here already. If it doesn't, you're going to hit Pick Texture. It might just take a moment to pop up. Once it does, you'll actually be able to select the file that we just dropped in. So I'm going to scroll down. There you can see Map 18, Prussian Infantry Diffuse. I'm going to select that. It can be a straining process for this. So just give it a moment, give it some time. Gonna hit OK. And then we're gonna select it and it's gonna pop up here. Now, when I move this around, you can see it's changing where this is on here. You can select vertices instead, so you can still see the body itself better. But as you can see, it's completely the wrong scale. What you need to do is hold right-click, choose Scale again, and we need to increase this 4 times, so at 400% scale. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this until it lines up best I can get it with the texture file. As you can see, it already looks better. It's fixed pretty much. I just need to do some fine tuning, make sure that everything's where it's supposed to be. Maybe this needs to go a little further to the side. There's really no like surefire way to tell other than to keep checking back with the model. Make sure everything looks about right. Circles are a good way to check that. If they're even around the edges, it looks like I did a pretty good job here. So we should be all set. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to collapse it too. Again, bake it in. Now it's permanently set that way unless I open the editor again. So that's that model pretty much all edited. The next step is to do the same thing with the head. I'm just going to kind of do that here, and you can watch without explanation. Okay, as you can see, I did the same process for the heads. Much the same way I did the hands, we also deleted the heads because we're going to be keeping the heads from the example characters. It's going to be easier that way. We don't have to mess with their UV mapping, which is the whole thing. It'll be fine, I promise. I almost forgot to save, so next you're going to want to save as, and save it as a separate file than your example. I recommend keeping the example character as a separate file that you can refer back to, especially if you're going to be making more uniforms. It's always better to work off the original unless your new model is very close to an old one that you made. But next, I'm actually going to add a backpack to this. Sometimes if you add backpacks later, it can mess with the bones and how that they map to the textures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in a backpack that I made earlier. You can make them yourself. I'm going to pull in one without a little extra pouch section. I'm going to import it just as we did the other model. And there we go. This backpack, I've already adjusted the normal mapping. I've already changed the UV mapping. I've set it up when I made it myself. If you would like a separate video on some simple tool tips on how to make like backpacks and other simple models, I'd be happy to make another video on that. Just leave a comment, make some requests. If there's enough, I'll definitely do that. But I'm gonna line up the backpack best I can on this model. You don't have to get it super precise. There's really no rule on where it has to go. It's just wherever you think it looks good. I think it looks fine there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our new model, and I'm just going to attach it. Boom, there we go. As you can see, it took on the texture of the thing. That's fine. We'll fix that later. Don't worry about it for now. Always a good idea to double check the normals. So I'm going to go edit normals again. Oh boy. Let's unify those a little better. Gonna collapse 2, and there we go. Ready to attach. Now, to attach the new uniform to our old one, first we should hide our new uniform and show the old one. We must first detach the old uniform. To do this, I'm going to select the object, gonna go to Editable Poly, go down to Element, select the whole thing, and then I'm going to deselect the hands, because as we said, we're keeping these hands. I'm going to then detach it. Now, it's very important that you don't do anything in between detaching the old model and attaching the new model. The reason for this is that can seriously mess up the bones, as I alluded to before. It will mess up the way that they map to the character, or at least it has in the past for me. So, once again, I don't know everything about this. I don't know why things happen. This is just what I do. So if you want to do the things that I do them this way. Just going to detach this. I'm just going to call it garbage. You can leave it as object 1, but sometimes it's confusing for me. So I'll call it garbage. And then I'm going to attach the new uniform. This guy here. Boom. Here we go. I'll close the attach thing. Very important. I'm going to hide garbage. And then let's check this out. That's what we're dealing with here. Let's make sure that the bones are doing the right thing. I'm going to open up the skin editor here, go to envelope. Look at that. We can see the chest is roughly located in the chest with a nice gradient on either side. If you were to open up the example model, it would look very similar. The next thing is to do the same for the heads. So I'm going to collapse this. Not collapse the way we did before, I'm just going to close it. And then I'm going to first actually duplicate this head, because we have 2 heads we want to put new hats on. I'm going to duplicate the hat. So I'm going to right click, clone. I'll do as a copy. There we go, we have 2 of them. I'm going to hide them. And we're going to do the same process, but with keeping the base game heads. So same thing as before. Element, select the whole thing. Deselect the head. Take care that you deselect the eyes there. They're actually separate elements. I usually just make sure I drag a box over the whole thing to make sure I get any little hidden parts inside there. Detach. Okay. Attach our new hat. Done. Hide the garbage. Hide the old head. Another one. Make sure you actually select it in the scene view here. Elements, deselect, again using Alt. Detach, okay, attach our other hat. And that's that. The head's bones, for whatever reason, tend to be a little more robust, less prone to messing up, so you don't have to worry about them too much. So you don't have to check them really. They should just be fine. But yeah, now we have our new uniform attached to the old one. The next step is to do some bone editing, because some things still mess up even when you do everything right. Before we get into the bone editing, we need to take out the garbage. We're going to delete all the things we just removed from the old model. The reason we do that is because just because they're hidden, they're still part of the model, and it's just going to cause problems down the line. So we are going to take care of that now and just delete them. Now, as I said, there are some problems with the bones. What I'm going to do first, before we adjust that, is I'm going to reset the texture here by opening up our texture editor. And I already have some things set up. Now, let me go over this. This is how to create submaterials. You're going to need separate submaterials for the head and a separate submaterial for the body. And the body one will include hands, body, and the backpack. To do that, you're going to take one of these multi/sub objects here. Let me make this a little bigger. And you drag that into here. Click on it. It'll pop up here. You can set the number of things. So if I'm doing one for the body, I'd do 3. For each of these, I could give them a name and then set this as a physical material by double-clicking that. And I do that for each of the things that I want. I've already done this, so I'm going to delete these. And I'm going to move this a little bit to the side. Now, to assign this material to the body, I'm going to click on this. Click back onto this guy. I'm going to hit this little button, Assign Material to Selection. Boom, there we go. It's reset it so that it's just a plain texture. That's going to give us a better view of the bones when we take a look, and it's not going to bring any unneeded textures with it into Unity when we do our later edits. So we're going to open up our skin and envelopes again. As you can see, this nice gradient is there. The backpack is a little messed up though, because it's not used to having a backpack there, so we need to do some editing. To do that, we're going to make sure we have chest selected, and we're going to click on vertices and select element. Now when I click on one of these, it's going to select all the vertices in an element, like the backpack for example. So I'm going to select everything in the backpack. That way we have selected all of the vertices on that pack. We're going to make sure that the chest bone has the largest degree of influence, essentially, over our new part here. Others suggest that you attach the backpack to the middle spine. That also works. I don't know which one's best. I've been using the chest, and it works fine for me. But feel free to attach it to the middle chest. It'll add a little bit of like a wobble to it, which is kind of cool if you want, or if you attach it to the middle spine. But in any case, I'm going to attach it to the chest, and to increase the influence, or really attach it to the chest, I'm going to go down to where it says Abs Effect here. There's a little button here, or a little insert panel. I can scroll up all the way, or I can just type in a 1, and it should go that deep red. Now this is entirely under the sway of our chest bone. But we're not done. We've fixed the backpack, but we're not done. We need to look under the shoulders. These are some of the most commonly messed up things when it's transferred. It should not really look like this. It's got the right idea, but we need to do some tweaking. This middle band on the arm, we're going to first deselect select element. This middle band on the arm needs to be all red. So I'm going to select, drag over those, make sure I've selected everything I want. We're going to crank that up to be all red. Next, this line here needs to be orange, like a dark orange. And then these on the end here shouldn't have any influence at all, so we're going to put that to 0. This here is fine. It should be like a kind of yellow. Let's play with that a little bit. It should be kind of like a palish yellow. There we go. Same thing on this side. I'm going to mess around, try to find the band on this side. There we go. That should also be that deep orange. And then this, not the backpack. That's the one thing you have to keep in mind is when you're selecting like that, you don't grab extra bits. Like, this is actually part of the epaulette there. So I'm going to deselect that, again using Alt. And then I'm going to put this to a nice pale yellow. That looks about right. You're also going to want to do the same thing to the other arm. If you want a direct comparison, what you should do is open up a second instance of 3ds Max and open your example character. You can take a look at the bones on that and try to get them to match as closely as you can. After you've done it a few times, you should kind of get an idea of what they should look like. But for now, the shoulders are pretty much what you want to worry about. There's also some other things though. So if your part or your model has parts that are not included on the basic model, it won't know how to quite map to them. For example, if your part has some nice big shoulder pads, maybe it's an officer, they might be too much under the influence of the shoulders and like kind of get pulled down with the arm when it lays flat at its side. It's not T-posing like a boss here. So what you should do is, for example, on the right side, go under right clavicle, and you'd want to grab the epaulette or the little shoulder piece, and you'll increase the influence there. You might not want to do it all the way because that'll make it very stiff looking, but you definitely want to increase it, make sure that it's not as much under the influence of the shoulder. The big one on the ones like Prussians here, though, is the scabbard here. Prussians have this cool scabbard. However, because it's down by the legs, the mapping is actually going to pull it to be attached to things like the thigh and the other legs. Let me show you. I'll go back up to, let's say, left spine, or not, sorry, not left spine, left thigh. Yeah, you can see the tip of the scabbard here is attached to the thigh. What's going to happen is when he takes a step with his left foot, part of that scabbard is going to be stretched out with it, and that's going to look awful, and it's not what we want. What we should instead do is attach it to the middle spine, where the scabbard attaches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to select element. I'm going to make sure I have middle spine selected. I'm going to drag a box over the scabbard. I'm also going to do the same for the ammo box. As you can see, it's not totally under the influence, but it should be. So I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to grab that too. As much of it as I can. I don't want anything extra. For example, I don't want to grab the bandolier, because the bandolier should have a gradient attached to it, and it should be under the influence of different bones. So right now, I'm just going to mess with the scabbard and the little ammo pouch. I'm going to go back down to Abs Effect. I'm going to crank that up to the max. They'll be a little stiff, but that's fine. A scabbard should be. And the ammo pouch should be as well. They'll just now stay pretty much in line with the hips of your unit. It also might take some other playing with for other things. Sometimes the buttons on some more complicated units get a little messed up. For example, maybe some higher up buttons might be under the influence of the middle spine or the lower spine. It'll just take some playing around with. You really won't know until you put it in game and mess around with it, see what's wrong, come back here and fix it. But that's pretty much it for editing the bones. It's a very important step so your guy doesn't look super wonky. Once you're done, just collapse it, not collapse it, but close it, and then go back to editable poly. And that's it for editing the bones. Now, I've already talked about the material, sub-material. I'm going to press M, pull that up again. I didn't really explain what it does, though. So, remember when I dragged the texture onto this and we attached the backpack, and the backpack took on the texture of our base uniform, and it looked pretty awful. The reason that is because in this editor, it's not smart enough to differentiate the sub-materials, even if we assign them. What will happen, though, is when we pull this into Unity, if we have these sub-materials on there, Unity is smart enough to know that when I drag a material onto the body, it's only going to go onto the sub-material I assign it. Same thing with the backpack. I can drag a backpack onto the backpack, and for the hands. The reason we want one for the heads as well is because we need to differentiate between the hat and the head. In Unity, and as part of the example they provided, the example character, there are already material maps for the hands and the head. We just have to worry about the uniform and anything else we add. If you added other parts to it that you want them to have their own texture maps, you should do the same thing. Just add more sub-materials to the list, and you'll be good to go. What's important to do now, though, is make sure that the right materials have the right ID number identifiers. The head should be fine because it's set up already, but we did add a backpack and we messed a little bit with the body, so let's take a look. I'm going to open up editable poly again, make sure I have elements selected, and I'm going to click on the body. If I scroll down and I look under polygon material IDs, I can see the set ID for the uniform is 2. Well, if I look under here, body 2, yeah, that's what I want. Hands are 1, that's what I want. Backpack is 2, oh, that's not what I want. So what I need to do is I need to select the backpack. I'm going to drag a box over it, make sure all the elements are selected. I'm going to bump that up to 3. There we go. That's what I want. Now it has a separate submaterial, so I can assign it its own texture, its own material in Unity. Okay, now we are pretty much done. So to recap, we've pulled in our new unit, we've edited the normals, we've adjusted the UV mapping, we've made sure the bones are all correct, we've fixed them, we've kept the base heads and hands so that they keep their textures and all that, and they work well with the example that is provided, and they're the easiest for us to edit later on. The only thing left to do is export it. Now before we do that, we can double check each of these and make sure that the normal mapping is correct. So we can go back into edit normals. It should be fine even if it looks like that. You can just hit unify to double check and it's fine. Before you collapse anything, by the way, make sure it's under the skin modifier. That way it doesn't delete the bones. So collapse that back too. Yeah, it should be fine. So next we're going to export this. So I'm going to go to File, Export. It's going to default it to wherever the hell this is. Instead, I'm going to go to a separate place that I like to put them. I created a folder for all my finished FBXs and all that. I'm going to make sure I'm saving the type as an FBX. I'm going to call it Prussian Example. Save. Another important step. By default, if you're in America, and I think no matter where you are, it's going to be set to export it in inches. They did not design this for inches. You will have a very, very humorous thing happen where your guy will look absolutely awful. All of his body parts will be enormous, but his skeleton will be the same size. It looks horrendous and also quite funny. Let me pull up an example here. But yeah, we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So instead, what you should do is go under Advanced Options, go to Units, and change the Scene Units Converted To and put it on centimeters. Not decimeters, that'll make it 10 times too big, centimeters. That way, when you hit OK, these errors should pop up. That's fine, those are the errors you want. Hit OK, and yeah, that'll be good. If you keep it on decimeters, or inches, what will happen instead is your guys will kind of take on the appearance of bobbleheads, and they'll look like this. I recommend not having your guys look like this. Please export them in the right units. Anyway, we've exported it. We are now actually ready to go on to part 4. Alright, part 4 is editing our uniform. This is the fun bit. This is the part that actually makes it look different. So far, all we've really done is just get the Prussian in the game. Maybe you put a different head on it or a different uniform. Actually, we haven't even gotten it in the game yet. We've just made a model of it. This is the part where you make it look how you want to look. Say, for example, I want my Prussian to have a different colored collar, because that's something they do. Maybe I'd want to select it. I'll change a few things, change a few colors, maybe add some designs. Maybe I'll even mess with the normal mapping, make things different shiny in the specular mapping. All that, if you want me to kind of explain about, I'll do that in another video. The point is, for this step, this is where you're going to edit your uniform. And then we'll move on to part 5. Alright, we're almost there. Part 5, Unity, step 5. First, we're going to create a subfolder in our character model reference example folder that will contain the files we need for our mod. I called it Prussian example. We'll go into that. And I'm going to drag in all the files that we cropped out into this folder. So that's our specular, our AO, our diffuse, and our normal mapping. All the ones for our specific Prussian dude. Next, I'm going to put the actual model in there itself. Navigate to where you saved that, to where you exported it. I'm going to put the FBX in there. And lastly, I need to actually grab the materials in Unity. To do that, I'm going to navigate to one that I made before, but you can also grab the ones that are from the example. For example, this British infantry uniform. You're also going to need the hands and the heads. If you, for example, have two different heads, like maybe you grabbed a head from a Prussian and a body of a Brit, you're going to need two separate materials for the body and the head, but I'll show you that. So let's navigate to the ones that I made for our guys, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's try the light infantry, for example. So for this, we have a backpack, hands, heads, but I also made one for the body and one for the head. Now you can literally just copy and paste these and change the files associated with each. I'm going to copy these for now. I'm going to put them in the folder we're going to work on, the Prussian example. Paste. And there we go. I'm going to rename these because I like being organized. So we actually have the same uniform since they're both Prussian. So I actually only need one of these. I can just pull the same material on both the hat and the body. So I'm just going to call this, just Prussian infantry. And I'm going to delete this extra one. Okay, they're all in there. I'm going to open up Unity. It's going to take a second to load because it has to create all these meta files for each of the materials that we put in there, each of the assets. But then when we open it, it's fine. I'm going to do a new scene just to be safe. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag our model into the scene here. I'll rotate it. I'll move it closer. Don't worry about the face looking all like this. It's just because I didn't assign an extra material to it. Didn't really need to for what I did. It'll be okay, I promise. The next step is to drag the materials onto what we want. So backpack goes in the backpack. Look at that, it's a 7-foos backpack. Hooray. Next, I'm going to drag the hands onto the hands. Look at that. They're all set up because they're the base hands. Drag the head onto the head. Why is there this gray here? Well, because remember we have two heads and right now they're overlaid each other. So I'm going to uncheck this one. We're going to focus on the first one for now. I'm going to drag the head onto that guy. And I'm going to drag the infantry thing onto there. Don't worry about the fact that it's not quite correct. Remember that this is for a different unit. We haven't applied our textures yet. So I'm going to drag the material onto the body then as well. Again, it's not the right unit. Don't worry about it. Next, I'm going to select our material. It's very important that you change rendering mode. It'll be by default opaque. You want to change it to cutout. That way it's able to cut around any alpha mapped areas. Don't worry about that for now. Just do it. I promise you need to. With this selected, you can see spots for all of the textures that I said we needed earlier. We have the albedo, that's for our diffuse. We have the specular, we have the normal map, and the occlusion. We're just going to drag these into place, starting with our specular. That got fixed immediately. We'll drag the AO. We'll drag the normal map. It comes in not correct because it doesn't know it's a normal map yet. We're going to hit fix. Hooray. And then we are going to drag the diffuse onto there. And then voila. There we have our Prussian dude. Prussian line infantry. With our backpack. Fully textured and everything. Now at this point, it's a great time to go back and make any changes you want. Now that you can actually see your uniform on a body, on the person itself, it's a great time to go back in and say, okay, I don't like this shade of blue. I'm going to go change that. Then every time you save and export your file from GIMP as a PNG and drag it into this folder, it'll automatically update. It'll automatically change. Oh, another really important thing is that you do have to drag the heads and the hats onto each separate head that you have. And then it's important that you, before you do anything else, you recheck them so that they're all part of the scene. So do that now. Go back into your editor, make any changes you want, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, once you've made all the edits you want to do, it's time to actually get this on Steam so we can get it in-game. The first thing you want to do is we're going to rectify the problem of having the missing heads. Some of you might be familiar with this issue. It only ever happens after a couple respawns of your guys, of your characters, where their head just kind of disappears. And obviously we don't want that. It doesn't much matter during line battles because it usually won't happen that you respawn, but for any other game mode or just messing around on a training map, it's good to rectify this issue. So to do that, we're going to collapse this little directory, and we are going to right-click and select Unpack Prefab. What this is going to do is it'll unpack this, and we can drop it down. And what we're going to do is create duplicates of all these, and we're going to create like our extra LODs. So I'm just going to select and hit Control D. We need 4 extra ones or 5 extra ones so that we have 6 in total. First I did head 1. Do the same for head 2 and for the uniform itself. Then becomes the very tedious task of going through and renaming all these to be the proper LOD. Obviously, this is a time-consuming and annoying thing to do. It's one of the reasons that I only ever do a couple, like 1 or 2 heads for each of these uniforms, and why I totally get it if you just do 1 head, because it's annoying. Especially the later steps that we'll have to do. But for now, we just have 2 heads and this, so it's not too bad. Just go through, make these edits. You will have to do this every time you go back through and make edits to your uniform though. So like say you put it in game and you want to update it and you want to reassemble everything in the scene, you will have to do this again. But it's not too bad. And if you care about quality and having a variety of different heads, then more power to you. Anyway, now that we've done that, the next step is to click Holdfast SDK Tools, and we're going to create an empty mod. I'm going to call it Press Example, because consistency, sort of. We're going to create the mod. It's going to open up an empty folder here. Ta-da! Next, we are going to go to Character Uniform Importer. We're going to hit Pre-Setup. Our target mod is this Press Example. If you were changing a different mod or doing something else, you'd select that. I have a lot of them. Our next step is we're going to click on this on the side, our little model here, and we're going to drag that into this box. Next, I'm going to fill in the rest of this information. Prussian, and he's going to be Army Line Infantry. Down at the bottom, the regiment, I'm just going to put regiment because whatever. These here are the sprites. So, for example, the menu sprite is what you see when you're on the character select screen and you tab through. That's the picture you see. I'm not going to go into how to make sprites. There is a sprite maker in this. I find it garbage. Instead, what I do is I put the characters in game, I take a picture, and I crop out around them. It's a time-consuming thing. It's annoying, but I like the results, so I do it anyway. You don't need to do that. You don't even need it to be a picture of the guy. You can just put a picture of whatever you want in there. In fact, you don't even need a sprite at all. They can just be like a white box, which is what will happen if you leave this blank like I'm about to do. All of that aside, if you do put some sprite images in there that you want to use, just put them in the same folder that we put the rest of our materials in. Select the sprites. So for example, if we go to this one and we select the sprites, what you should do is after you've selected it, go to texture type and change it to sprite 2D and UI, and then hit apply. That way it doesn't have any background and it's ready to be a sprite. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to hit OK. This pops up, hit OK. Our next step is to assign the number of LEDs. So I'm going to click on head 1. I'm going to go to size here. I'm going to change that to 6. Your client head item mod might be collapsed, or this LOD level renderers might be collapsed. Uncollapse it. Size 6. These pop up. Do the same for head 2 and for uniform 1. Next, I'm going to set up object. This pops up. Hit OK. Oh, uniform 1 failed. Doesn't matter. We're going to fix it. Change LOD1 to uniform 1. Go through for all of these. LOD2 to LOD2, LOD3, LOD3, 4, 5. Hit done. Do the same thing for head 2. Tedious, annoying, but we care about quality here, so we're going to do it anyway. We'll go through and head 1. As you can imagine, if I had all 7 heads here, I would be even more annoyed, but that's why I only did 2. Alright, that's done. We can save it. So we're going to do SDK Tools, Character Uniform Importer, Save Object. Double check everything is saved correctly. I have no idea how to actually check this, make sure it is, but I'm going to assume it is. Lastly, we're going to hit Build Mod. This takes a little while. It's compiling everything, it's making it into a usable thing. The more things you add to it, the longer this will take, but I'm not going to make you sit through all of it. I'm going to pause here and resume when it's done. Alright, it's done building. When it's done building, if it's done so properly, this window should appear. A little finder, a little explorer that has your mod and this little picture. This picture is what will appear on the Steam page. If you want to be a proper person and show the world what your mod looks like, you should also edit this picture. So you can just put it in any photo editor, drop it in. It's important to do so, at least for me, because, as they say in Gmod, no pics, no clicks. If I don't see what your mod looks like, I'm not going to download it. Also, since nobody really cares about that here, just put a picture of it so that people can see your cool work. You know, vanity, hooray. Anyway, it's done building. The next step is to just actually upload it to Steam. So, we're going to go into SDK Tools again, and upload to Steam Workshop, unsurprisingly. It's going to load into the game view. Might just take a moment, and then it will let us define what we want to put on our Steam page. There we go. Upload to Workshop. I'll leave it there. I can call it whatever I want, and then I'm going to say an example Prussian infantry with a backpack. And we'll hit upload. It will upload, and once it's done, it will immediately open your browser with a link to the Steam page of your guy. Hooray! Once it happens, it'll just take a moment, and you'll be all set. The way you load your character into your server is through the number ID for your mod. You'll have to go into your config files and add that in there. I'm not going to get into that right now, especially because it's different for every server provider. You'll have to talk to them. I mean, chances are if you are an event host, or your job is just to make scenes, mods, whatever, for use on other people's servers, you will already know how to do this. Or at least they will. So here it is, Prussian example. It's all set. It's around 15 megabytes. That's fine. Some are a little bigger, some are a little smaller. Depends on how many heads you've added, any extra bits, stuff like that. But yeah, that's how to do it. Hopefully this little tutorial has been helpful. That's pretty much most of my knowledge there. That's everything I know about taking things from ground level all the way to a functioning mod. If you follow those steps, it should work. If you don't, it might still work, because there's probably better ways to do it. And that brings me to the last topic here is, please help. I don't know everything about this. This is just how I do it. And like I said, there's probably better ways of doing it. There's probably other cool things you can do with these mods that I just don't know how to do. Maybe you know how to edit the textures in GIMP really well. Maybe you know how to get higher quality models or better things to do to make them look just that little bit better in game. If you know of a better way of doing things, please don't crucify me in the comments or anything like that. I would also like to know. This is just a little informational for people that have no idea, just like me, and would like to start making mods best they can. There's all sorts of other things you can do. This was just the basic, like how to turn the British guy into a Prussian guy. If you want to, you could edit the models. You can mess with these and pull them elsewhere and do all kinds of funky stuff. But you don't really need to. If you just want to, say, recolor a guy, but if you want to like add other models, maybe you just really want the Prussian guard head on a British body or something, then you can do all that. Just put in the different models, adjust the UV maps to the right atlases that you've cropped out, and so on. Another thing you can do as like a side comment, if you wanted to say add a plate to this guy and you just wanted to add the British line infantry's like belt plate to the Prussian, you can just take the model off one, put it on this, and then just like take the you give two options. You can either assign a different material ID to this and then assign it to a different material that you apply in Unity, or you can just take the texture in the GIMP file, or the PNG file, and like paste it in this empty space here, and then when you're editing the UV map, just move the plate one from wherever it was before over top of where this is. And if you've done that before you dropped this texture onto your 3D model here, then it should show up fine. That's a little more complicated, and I can do some more videos explaining that, as well as other videos, like I said, explaining some fundamental, some basic ways of editing things in GIMP, like recoloring, or some very simple ways to make shapes and other objects in 3ds Max. Like I said though, there's probably better tutorials out there on how to do that. I've learned everything here through either being shown or by messing around myself and just figuring things out one at a time, watching tutorials on YouTube. I recommend you do it that way because you'll get a better understanding for it, but I'm always happy to help as well as the rest of the modding community. Like I said, hopefully this is helpful. If you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. I'll do the best I can to answer them. Big thanks to everybody who gave me their knowledge, the files, and everything else. Catch you next time.